Hi, friends. Welcome to the Mobile Bev Pros podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing mobile bar and event professionals with the information they need to succeed. I'm your host, business coach, and founder of the Mobile Bar Academy, Sarah Murphy. In each episode, the Mobile Bev Pros team will bring you industry experts, information, anecdotes, and opinions with the goal of assisting you in building a profitable, sustainable, and successful business that supports you in creating wealth. I'm excited to share with you today's episode, so let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today we are going to be talking about BREW. BREW just happened at the time of this recording like 2 weeks ago. I think we're like 2 weeks out now from the most profound experience.
Only a week, right? A week.
Is it a week? I have no idea. It warped time for me. And like now I don't even know what is my name? What are we doing here? BREW was the most profound experience I've ever had at any sort of business related gathering. And now we have ran camp many times in the past, and camp was cool. You know, it had its place. This was not that. Like, not even close, not even at all. This is the first time either you or I had run a retreat, and retreat we did. People had the most incredible feedback for this. And we got to witness people in their most powerful moments, their most vulnerable moments. They got to see that those two things aren't separate from each other. They walked away with a killer strategy and with a level of empowerment and revitalization. That's a plug. Business revitalization and empowerment workshop that I don't think anybody anticipated. And like it couldn't have gone better. It couldn't have gone better, period. That's a whole sentence.
So one of the things that we intentionally put into the agenda, it was a happy hour, like a welcome that was the night before the actual conference was intended to start. And everything about this conference is intentional. Everything about this was thought about not only from the perspective of like how do we educate, how do we give them the information that they think that they are here for and that they want to get out of it, but also from like a subconscious, psychological, operational perspective. And so the welcome hour, which was on Sunday night from 5 to 7, I had assumed most people would attend, but not everybody. And the reason I made that assumption is that at camp, and prior to being named camp, it was named SWIG. So everything is always 4 letters and it stands for something. Actually, SWIG didn't stand for anything. BREW does. BREW has intentionality between every letter. I created that particular window of time with the assumption that many people would show up, not everybody, because historically, not everybody did show up the first night. A lot of people would show up and start the day of instruction in the past. Everybody came to the happy hour at BREW, and I was tickled and I was shocked. And I mentioned it while I was there. I was like, oh my gosh, everybody came. And the people I was talking to at the time, like, what do you mean? Why are you shocked? Like, of course we came. This is what we're here for. And I was just really like, okay, off to a good start. Everybody's already engaged. But the reason I put that there was that I wanted everybody on site and well rested that night. Historically, that was not the case. And we were right in downtown Old San Juan. So, like, they be options. And not everybody listened to this instruction, but like when they left the happy hour, my instructions were please don't go out. I know that's tempting, but I would love everyone to be super well rested for day one and like just go to bed, get to your room, have a good night's sleep, and then the fun will start tomorrow. And that worked well. I think people, for the most part, there were a few hungover peeps, but like, listen, it's the bar industry and adults be adulting. We were in Old San Juan. They went dancing, they went drinking. But for the most part, everybody was there on time. Everybody was there for the 5 p.m. welcome hour. And then for the most part, chilled, showed up on day one of instruction, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I think that was an important aspect because on day one, we did a lot of the subconscious, the unconscious, the vision work of what do you want to plan, right? You got to start with like the what and the why. And it really does require you to be kind of fully juiced and ready. And I think for the most part, we succeeded there.
I think we had a caliber of attendee that surprised me. And when I say caliber, what I mean is that they were all in, right? We were all in, but they were all in. And they were all in when it came to having difficult conversations, when it came to supporting each other through difficult conversations. I mean, the community outpour of love and support that we witnessed was just the most moving thing. The caliber of people that attended helped us see even clearer our path forward with MVP. And so you guys have already started to see in the emails, started to see in the Facebook group that we are changing trajectory. That word was hard for me. Changing nope. You know what I'm saying at MVP. And
We're pivoting.
we're
You know that
pivoting.
part in
We're
Ross and Friends. Pivot.
pivot. We are pivoting into a more premium, ultra premium space. And a lot of that was both inspired by, but also affirmed by the attendees at BREW. We had already started to feel that we wanted to make this shift. And the people who showed up at BREW just confirmed for us that it was absolutely the place that we want to go and the place that we want to live. Because for us, business has never just been this like one-dimensional or even two-dimensional or even three-dimensional thing, right? It's never been like this strategy, one spot to the other. And this was always, I think, what was missing at camp. People kept saying when we would ask them, like, what did you love about camp? They're like, gathering by the fire. And we're like, cool, we have all these speakers and you wanted to have beer by the fire. You know what I mean? Like, we love that. But then we infused that into BREW and we were like, how can we give people more time to gather? You did a phenomenal job of scheduling intentional space. And so there would be lesson, there would be dissemination, and then there would be space. And in that space, so much magic and so much transformation took place. And we've always wanted that. And so I think that BREW for us was both inspiring and affirming of the path forward for MVP.
I realized like the day before we took off to get to BREW that I had never attended a retreat. So not only was it our very first retreat that we've ever hosted, I had never attended a retreat. And I had some huge imposter syndrome moments all of a sudden. What if I do it wrong? Like, is there an expectation of what this is supposed to look like? Because I just decided that I wanted to create the retreat that I would want to attend. And sometimes like people look at me and they're like, Sarah, my brain doesn't work like your brain. I get that often, actually, especially when it comes to doing planning, which is the methodology that I taught at BREW was a revised form of the I Map It process, which I used last year, which the I Map It process in general is a revised form of the way that I taught annual planning the year before that, which again, right, like it builds upon itself. And the feedback that I get helps me refine it so that it's easier for me to communicate to other people. And like yesterday, I was told by one of our accelerators that like he prefaced as he was going to walk me through his strategy. My brain doesn't work like yours. So I was like, I know that my brain doesn't work like yours. So it could have gone either way. But when I built out the rhythm for BREW, I took feedback from the other in-person events that we'd done in the past. And the reason we decided not to do another camp was because, again, to your point, like after camp was over and we send out the feedback forms and we get feedback like, my favorite part was the fire. And then we also got feedback like there were too many speakers, they were too close together, there was too much learning, I was overwhelmed, I was exhausted by the end of the day. When I did the Woo the Premium Buyer workshop here in Nashville, it was a full day workshop. And then we went out for drinks and had just the most amazing time after that workshop. And matter of fact, a lot of people who came to that workshop came to BREW. Their feedback was it should have been a 2-day workshop. Like the, again, too much information all at once. And so when we were planning BREW, space was an obvious necessity that I have this tendency to try and infuse every single second, every single minute with an intense amount of information. And even the space that I give for people to actually like do the work in between, like it wasn't enough. And so BREW felt airy to me. It just felt like there were all these gaps that I was like, I hope people find enough value when I was doing the scheduling. But it was perfect because there were like the gaps were what created the connection. The gaps and the space between things is where the information like settled in people's bones. And it was able to breathe almost. And that was transformational for me in the fact that, yes, they're there for the information, but is the information worth anything if it doesn't actually sink in? No.
Yeah, and I see you with such love and reverence because I know why you do that. And it's because you have an immense amount of respect for people's time and their investment. And so you want them to get max value. And so in previous iterations, you have placed as much value as you can possibly place into an 8-hour day. And so I know that that was really uncomfortable for you. But I also see, like, first of all, your massive transformation and even allowing the space at this retreat for people to connect and what it's done to you, right? Where you're like, oh, the magic, it was glorious. It was also transformational for me in that I don't know, I really realized prior how much value was in the space. Like, I live in the space. I love the space. I want more magic, more space, right? Like more of the squishy, gushy, deep, vulnerable conversations. And I have a shadow that's like, people don't like that, Dawn. You're so abrasive. You're too much, Dawn. Right? Is like the voices in my head. And while I was there and I saw how much people did value the space to connect, the space for those deep conversations, I realized one, like that was what created the transformation for them to be able to see their business differently so that they could plan a 2025 that wasn't fucking mediocre. Like, but mic drop on that. I don't know that I realized prior to that how valuable that magic actually is. And so this is absolutely something we will be doing again. If you're wondering, if you were watching stories for MVP for me or for Sarah, and you were like FOMO, or for any of your mobile bar friends, and you were like FOMO, you should be afraid of missing out because it was absolutely glorious. And you could have been there, but you weren't. It was fabulous. We will be doing it again. We are talking about a couple of different locations. We're considering like Hawaii is on the board. I don't know. This hasn't been confirmed by anybody but me. Mexico's on the board. Like we're looking at a couple of different destination hotspots that are available for the next BREW 2026. And we're going to start collecting deposits for that now. Just like last year, we opened doors pretty early to get people in. And it was so valuable that like it's hands down, we're absolutely going to do it again. And so now we just have to decide on the place, and we're going to go ahead and invite you guys to put down a deposit, location TBD. We could probably decide what dates we wanted to do this
It'll be
on.
similar dates because the dates that we chose, which were the 12th through the 15th, were chosen because it's after the new year, so all those New Year's events, but we haven't really picked up for like Q1 across the country. It's just the deadest period for mobile bar owners, so they have the ability to get away. I also want to mention that we've decided to keep this intimate. So this past year, we had thought intimate would be around 40 people or under, and we think 25 is probably the cap for this one, which is less than we even had at this event. So I think it's important for people to note that if they think they might be interested, like they should reserve a ticket, and we'll create a wait list if like we sell out in case, because there were a few people who had put it down to deposit this time, but then for whatever reason, life happened and they had to cancel. So we'll create a wait list for anybody who doesn't get one of those 25 reservations. But the intimacy here, again, my word for the year is intimacy. So that's a priority for me to make sure that that is woven and steeped in kind of everything that we do in Mobile Bev Pros, because we've been in this game. 2017 is when I started Mobile Bev Pros, and it has evolved year over year over year. And when I look back on the things that people appreciate the most, what creates the biggest and best results and makes Mobile Bev Pros stand out in like how we serve is the intimacy. It is the community relationships between the mobile bar owners. And we've gathered so many times. We gathered in Nashville. Actually, we've gathered in Nashville quite a bit, but we did it in DC, we did it in Dallas, we did it in Santa Barbara, we did it in Denver, we did it in Puerto Rico. And those are the things that I think people get the most value out of, because those are the people who came to BREW. It's the people who had previously attended and in person and saw the value in that intimate connection and that in person that we just don't get a whole lot of, I think, in this industry. And a matter of fact, we actually heard that reflected back when you walked around the room at one point and said, "Hey, like, tell me, like, what are you hoping to get out of this?" And people shared with you that, like, they just feel like they're in a vacuum sometimes and that they just don't have a whole lot of people in their lives that understand the plight of the mobile bar owner. They might have business owner friends, but not industry specific connections, and that they saw value in that.
I will also add that this is not a mobile bar retreat. And so we talk to you guys a lot about mobile bars because you are our primary audience. However, the room wasn't even full of mobile bars. Most of them were mobile bar owners, but we also had various businesses being worked on and collaborated on. They were all event based.
But the people I think who've been the most vocal about the transformations that they had were not mobile bars. We had a caterer and we had another event-based business that doesn't do bar. She actually intentionally decided she was not going to do bar, but she does kind of like equipment rental. And they were the most vocal about how transformational and powerful the retreat was for them and their business. So proof in the pudding.
Yeah, and invite your friends because we're just creating one, magic, and two, strategy, right? Those are like, what a delicious duality, strategy and magic. And that's applicable to any business model. And so invite your friends, get on that wait list. And Sarah, I do have another question for you that is brew-ish related. We've touched on it a couple of times, but you've also gotten this question from accelerators recently. Mobile Bev Pros is changing trajectory. I tried to do it again. We're pivoting. That word in me. We're pivoting. And what can we expect moving forward? You've already started to implement a couple of different things. And we are, of course, revamping. Can I say that? Can I tell the people the big reveal about the Academy?
I guess the cat's out of the bag now. You just open the whole thing.
I mean, I could edit that out, but okay. So the Academy is going to get a huge revamp because year over year we learn and we grow and we evolve. And what worked for us last year, you'll likely never see Mobile Bev Pros become a stagnant company that's no longer moving because we would be bad representations of the entrepreneurial journey if we did that to you. Do you know? And so we want you to see as we're shifting and evolving, we want the same things for you. And so in this shift, this big evolution, some things are going to be changing. You want to tell us more about how you envision that and what's on the roster, at least in the immediate future for that?
Yeah. And I think pivot potentially is the wrong word, although I think it's funny to think about Ross and the couch and the stairwell. I think it's a deepening of who we want to be. Again, when we look back over the years that we've been doing this, intimacy is one of the things that clearly adds a ton of value to people's experience. And we do a good job, I think, of that just inherently. We focus on long form content. So when people are listening to podcasts, they're like spending 45 minutes with us, right? And we saw a lot of that at Brew. People came up to me and they were like, you have no idea how important you are in my daily like work life. I listen to your podcast all the time. Whenever I'm struggling, I listen to your podcast. Like your voice is always in my ear. And like that's amazing, first of all. But that intimacy is like one way. And so Brew gave me the opportunity to build that two-way intimacy. And I loved every moment of it. I loved every moment of being with people, looking people in the eye when I'm supporting them, sitting down next to them, like listen, I live in a virtual world right now, and I want more of that. So one of the things that we will be seeing is more in-person events. That feels so yummy. We've been dabbling in that over the past couple of years, but like every time we do it, we learn something new. And I feel like we might have hit a stride. I feel like we finally, after all of these events, we might have like a strategy that makes them less painful to execute. And so that's exciting. The other thing that we're going to see, which I think people, if they've been paying attention, have already noticed, is that we have seen reflected back to us that our biggest contribution, the biggest amount of value that people get or can get from our zones of genius is teaching them how to transition or bridge the gap between being mass market and being a premium, ultra premium service. This industry is not going to slow down in seeing people enter it. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, it's a more popular thing now, right? You can't go anywhere without seeing mobile bars. Two, it's a fairly low threshold business to start. You don't need to have a rig to get started. A lot of the most successful ones don't have a rig. And so when you're first getting started, you can literally just show up at an event, charge $50 an hour, and then you realize that's not enough and you start to build up. But you can get started for relatively inexpensive. So the bar is kind of low for like who can start a mobile bar. And the more people we get into the industry, the harder it is to compete for that budget and that mid-market space because those buyers are price sensitive. And so when you're in the mid-market space and you're talking to buyers who are price sensitive, you have very little wiggle room when it comes to pricing, and you're competing with all of your other neighbors based on price, and like gross. I don't love to live there. Where we love to live is the premium to upper premium market where you're selling the experience, you're selling the emotion, and the value is in how people feel, whether it's they feel like you've handled all the details and they don't need to worry about it, or whether they feel like your extra attention to detail leaves a better impression on their guests, or whether they feel like your willingness to go above and beyond and do the champagne tower or do the fancy garnishes or put glitter in the drink or whatever it is, right? That they feel like that's going to make them stand out. It's going to give them cred with their social circle. Like the people at that space, they value different things, and it's almost never the money. Sometimes it is like there is an upper cap to when people are just like, no, I can kind of get a similar level of value from a competitor, but they're not like line itemizing what is in the consumables package, right? Like they don't care at that level. But there's I think a gap in information in the industry as to how do you transition from mid-market, mass market to the premium space. And the example I gave to you previously that came to my mind when I was thinking about this, it was miscongeniality, right? And like they had to teach her how to walk the look, talk the look. Like she had to learn how to be in that space. And so messaging changes, imagery changes, the way that you operate changes. We can support you there because that's the space that I come from. And it's not impossible, but it is specific. We've been doing this for a long time. Like if you're in our accelerator program or if you work one-on-one or one-on-two with us, when we're reviewing your website, we're doing it from a place of the premium space. We're looking, where are you evoking emotions? What specific words are you using? And does it fall with your ideal client? Are you talking to the dreamer or the lover, or are you talking to the scholar, which like, no, gross, right? We don't want to bullet point out the things that are included in packages. We want to story tell about how this particular package impacts or will create the experience that they're seeking within their event experience. And so we have been beta pilot testing all of this content for the past 12 to 18 months. We did the Woo the Premium Buyer workshop. We did that webinar on the 4 different archetypes, the love languages for buyers. We did the Powerful Proposals webinar last year. We did BREW. All of these are premium, ultra premium experiences that were kind of our litmus test as to how much value would the industry get out of this level of information. At every turn, it was people wanted more, right? So when we did the Powerful Proposals webinar, people realized, okay, but now I need to go back and change my website. I need to change my messaging. I need to change my proposals. I need to change my Instagram to better align with what you taught. And so this is that opportunity for us to make the Mobile Bar Academy not just the space where people come to build industry leading mobile bars, which is still true, but industry leading mobile bars that are focused in the premium and ultra premium space. So if have you been in this industry for a while and you've been doing a lot of mass market and you're finding it harder to close things, or you're finding yourself having to work harder or more events in order to make the same amount of money because people are being more budget conscious right now, or just in general because there's more competition, not everyone is being more budget conscious. The premium markets and the upper premium markets are not as budget conscious, even today in this economy, than the other markets. And so if you want a bigger piece of that pie, if you want to move market positioning, It doesn't just look like increasing your pricing, unfortunately. A lot of times people just say double your pricing. Sometimes that works, but only if you are already attracting that market, but you were underpricing for what you were. If you're increasing your pricing and now suddenly you're not booking any longer and people are saying like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Like last year you were only this. If you're getting pushback, you're talking to the wrong market. And so shifting from one market to the other isn't as simple as just increasing your rates. There's a whole lot of work that needs to go into looking the part, acting the part, and executing the part. And so that's what the revamped Mobile Bar Academy is going to do.
In the luxury anti-laws, this is called selling the dream. And it's kind of a strange thing because you stop really selling and you start attracting. That's a big shift for people. And some people, that gap is too wide because they already are uncomfortable even selling. And so once they have to move from selling to becoming hyper attractive, that feels there's a lot of imposter syndrome that comes up. And my favorite thing about this switch for us are the dragons or the shadows that come up for people when they have to make this transition. A significant portion of the work you'll have to do is in trusting yourself, holding new levels of power, holding new levels of certainty, leaning back in sales conversations, and becoming attractive in your marketing and positioning. We saw this at BREW, the misunderstanding of what luxury or ultra premium even means. People have an idea that luxury just means expensive. And that's unfortunate because that's luxury sometimes is not expensive. It's just hyper unique. It's very exclusive. It's one of a kind. It's a dream rather than a reality, right? And these are all concepts that like I fucking love to live here. It's like the most artistic, delicious space for me. But there's a lot of mindset shifting that has to happen.
The whole thing around luxury is that it is impossible to duplicate. And so there's no way for us to teach luxury on a one-to-many scale. I can't create a lesson. It evolves and it comes from each individual as to what luxury looks like. So we do support luxury vendors, but we do that in a one-on-two, like personalized
Sure.
container. There's no curriculum to be done there. And most of the work we do, to your point, within those containers is befriend dragons.
Yeah.
It's not even strategy so much, although there can be strategy, but it's a lot of deprogramming as to what people think success looks like in business and saying those rules no longer apply to you. Like they're anti-laws that we use instead of laws.
Yeah, because luxury is genius, right? And so one of a kind from your soul type of thing. And to your point, that's not something that can be taught. However, a lot of the anti-laws of luxury can be borrowed and applied to make the premium and ultra premium market very sexy, very attractive, very magnetic to your ideal client. But ultimately, what I'm getting at here is just that the required mindset work, shadow alchemy, mundane magic to get you to that space is my favorite part of this transition that we are making, this deepening, as you said, of mobile bev pros and who we're for and what we'll be teaching.
As you were talking, I was reminded of what potentially was like one of my favorite parts of Brew, because you were mentioning the mundane magic, and there was lots of space for that. We very intentionally weave and speak to the subconscious and the unconscious in everything that we do. And if you've been around in the podcast or in any of my stuff recently, I've been doing a lot of reading and learning about the subconscious, neuroscience, how the brain works, buyer psychology. And that's an important part of the work that I do. But when creating a retreat, intentionality in every moment was important to me. Why are we doing what we're doing? How are we organizing things? What information do they need? But also, what information do we need in order to best support them? And on the first day, we did an exercise that like tore everyone wide open, and it was amazing. And then we collected that exercise along with their natal charts, which you and I created prior to attending, and we saved everybody's natal chart so we could review it. And that night, you and I spent no fewer than 6 hours, which was kind of an insane thing for us to sign up for because we had done a full day of teaching, engaging, workshopping. And then we signed ourselves up for dinner I think it was just like to go dinner in our room. And we went through and we read every single one of their contributions and then looked at their natal chart. And we really got to know people. And we looked at a few specific things. One, we wanted to look at where their Mars was because that's how they take action. And that's literally what we were trying to do is strategize for like, how are you going to take action this year? We also looked at their moon, which is how people subconsciously, unconsciously function. It's not necessarily their sun, which is what you can see. That's the vitality or ego. It's what you project on the world. But the moon is kind of how you are behind the scenes and how you operate. It was wild to both of us that like 80+% of people had their moon in Virgo, which is funny because my son is in Virgo. And so all of these people with their little moons in Virgo, loving my strategies, loving my frameworks, loving like all the detail oriented stuff, the information, the curation, they love all of that inside, even though their sun sign wasn't necessarily that. That was like really interesting. And then I think wasn't a lot of people Mars in Cancer? Wasn't that the other thing that we saw a lot of?
Yeah, Mars and Cancer, which is an intuitive form of action. It's a fluid form of action. It's a very artistic approach to how you take action. And so, even when you want the structure with that moon in Virgo and you love the structure, you're also going to need to leave space. Oh, there that is again. Leave space for mundane magic because you're more likely to take action when it comes from within, when it's this inspired or emotionally evoked place, which makes sense because in the premium space, we want to evoke emotion to sell things to people. And so it's no surprise. I mean, it was very surprising. It's not surprising now in hindsight that all of those people took emotional action to be with us because how they operate in the world, how they make change is tied to their emotional body, like heavily. And so, yeah, absolutely.
The other thing that Mars in Cancer does is it focuses a lot on relationships. And we saw that in the exercise that they turned in and we read, in that a lot of the reasons why people said that they do what they do was their family. It was the people in their lives. And like, I love that. Anyways, the reason why that was kind of one of my favorite parts of Brew is that I really felt, again, back to the intimacy piece, I really felt like we were better able to support people by having that deeper level of understanding, not only of like the exercise that they did that shared with us directly, like the impact that they wanted to leave on the world. And it wasn't, most of the time, it had nothing to do with their mobile bars or their businesses in general, right? It was real, it was raw, it was holistic. And so we then got to spend the rest of the time reflecting back to them that, like, hey, you're strategizing for this, but you said this is what you wanted to do. Like, there's a real misalignment between the thing that you're trying to accomplish right now and the thing that you want to accomplish in the future. And like, what you're doing right now is going to take you to where you want to be in the future. So let's rein it back in, or like, let's not get distracted, no shiny object syndrome. So it just felt like we were much better prepared to show up for them uniquely, everybody uniquely, based on like, hey, one thing that we know about you is that, you know, you have heavy Leo placements, which means it's important for you to be heard and mostly seen, right? And so I just loved that. That felt just like a level of support and intimacy that we were able to provide, like a real desire to know somebody that I think that a lot of people in retreats, they don't get that. And that felt really special.
Yeah, and that was my favorite thing. That was my biggest takeaway, right? Because what I didn't anticipate was the number of people who were excited to know more about their birth charts, right? Like we asked for that as like a back end. You and I right now are in the space where we really want to learn and integrate astrology into everything that we do. And so having all these birth charts was an opportunity for us to be like, oh, that's how that shows up. Okay, that's how that shows up, right? Like practice of astrology in action, like seeing real world people. And what I didn't expect is the number of people who, first of all, after every day, after every seminar was complete, everyone stayed. They stayed in the space. They talked with each other. They went deeper with each other. They also were like, Dawn, can you read my birth chart? Dawn, will you pull some tarot cards for me? Right. And I don't think that either of us anticipated that there would be such an attraction to that mundane magic as there was, both like connecting with other people, but also wanting to know deeper what's happening with me behind the scenes. Am I in alignment? What does the next step of my business look like? What energy do I need to be aware of? And I think that for me, I love what I do for Mobile Bev Pros. And I oftentimes see that as I support you in supporting people. And Brew helped me realize that maybe I have opportunity to support you and to support people, right? On a larger scale.
I've been begging you to do for years. So I'm
It's
glad
true.
that you're finally there.
It's true. It's true. I've been a hermit. The people at Brew don't realize, and I did cry about this at Brew because they didn't realize how healing that retreat was for me. Even though I was part of the facilitation process, I was also receiving massive healing from the shadow that I have around being seen as the mage, being seen as the Merlin to your King Arthur. Do you know what I mean? That's not something I expected to happen. And when it did happen, I felt really validated. And I also felt like the support that I was able to give people, God, it juiced me all the way up. Like I had a full blown, when I came home, like I really had to take a whole day to just crash because my energy, like I had been so high for so many days on like love and communion and depth that when I came home, I was like, whoa, reality. And it was really cold when I got home. So that was also very humbling.
The other unique thing about this situation, because we had done a number of events that's been established, I always felt very drained at the end. And like when I do a full day of teaching, it's a lot. With camp, for example, I wasn't the one that was teaching the whole time, but I was on the whole time. So from 7 in the morning when we were doing breakfast all the way to dancing and beers around the fire at like 9, 10, I'm on. And so I would always get sick almost immediately after these events were over. And so we started doing those shorter one days because I figured like that we can do one day and then recuperate. That was better, but it was more intense for people. And I never felt that way at Brew. And I think you and I did a much better job of like building boundaries. So like we would do the full day with people and they'd be like, come out with us, like go dancing. And we said no. And you and I would just take a walk around the city and we would trade information. That was another thing that was a really important part, I feel like, of our facilitation is like we would share with each other the conversations that we had. So then if you were talking to that person next or I was, we had the background of like, these are the things that they mentioned. Here's where we need to support them. So we were always supporting each other and supporting people. But I never felt exhausted. I never felt drained. I never felt like I couldn't do like another hour more. And you oftentimes also, like I will build in to our events recognition that dawn is done and like you can go hermit mode. And there's like one time where you're like, I just need to go back to the room or go for a walk. It wasn't even to go back. You wanted to walk it off. But that was the extent of it. For the most part, you didn't need to hermit.
Yeah, when I engage in mediumship, that channel in me is like blown wide open. Anybody who is energetically aware, when you're reading for someone or you're giving someone big information from the metaphysical, your body becomes the channel for that. And you're right. Oftentimes, like, I'm fucking over it and I'll just peace out. That didn't happen to me. And when I had to walk it off, it was actually the opposite. It was because I had so much energy in my body. And I didn't actually practice Kundalini while I was there. Kundalini is usually how I ground that energy and I align it so it's not so like sporadic and overpowering. And I didn't do Kundalini while I was there because I couldn't sit still even long enough to do Kundalini. And like that's not my favorite thing to admit, but I will say it out loud. And so when we needed to go walk it off, it was because I had pulled so much energy into my body and I was so lit up. And that's what I mean. When I came home, that like crash period, like I was high on energy the entire time. Like it was just like one incredible moment to the next. And there was like no downtime. I didn't even feel like I needed downtime. I just felt like I was living in this constant, yummy, churro flavored experience where everything was super colorful and all the people were glorious, you know? It was a little bit like coming home from heaven.
Yeah, it really was magical on all the levels. And I cannot wait to do it again. We are planning some smaller events, no details at this moment, but one of the next ones that we're pretty certain we're going to be doing is dead smack in the middle of summer. We'll do a leadership workshop. And that one, again, a result of Brew, of just kind of hearing the pain points of like where people are in their business and the things that the tools and information and support that they might need to get to that next level. Oftentimes it looked like hiring a team, intentionally building a culture, building out a onboarding process, how to hire and interview and discern so that you're choosing people that are in alignment with your company culture. Like leadership, you and I love to live there because we believe leadership starts with self leadership. And so we spend a lot of time helping people to lead themselves powerfully, again, seat of power, right? Hold more power. That's where it starts. And then you're able to kind of hold power and space for others and lead others. And so we'll be talking about that. And that'll probably be a 2-day workshop because, again, I've learned the value of space and not cramming 8 hours into a day of intense learning. And so we'll be doing that one. And then in Q4, we decided that we were thinking about marketing and sales workshop. And we did that in Q4 because established mobile bar owners are probably already really busy, busy, busy bees at that point. And those that are just getting started in their visibility game and their conversion game likely aren't as busy. And so they'll have the capacity to attend an in-person workshop where we can work through people's messaging, we can work through the various different visibility strategies that we teach, as well as once you do get a lead, how do you convert them? Like, what do sales calls look like? How do you overcome objections? Which is just so yummy. And we love doing that too. So another 2-day workshop that we're hoping to get on the calendar. So yeah, we've got lots of good in-person opportunities. We're also working really hard to put more intimacy into Mobile Bev Pros as just as a whole. And so we're going to continue to encourage people to reach out to us. If you listen to this podcast and you love it, if you find something valuable, like let us know, because that's one-way intimacy. You guys know us, but like we don't know who's listening. We don't get to know your stories or like how the different things are resonating with you unless you reach back out. If you're using fan mail to do that, we can't respond. It makes me so sad. We get texts from people through the fan mail in Buzzsprout, but we can't see their phone numbers, so we can't text back, and there's like no contact information. And that makes me real sad because sometimes I'm like, I love that. Thank you so much. And I want to hear more. We're leading into the Facebook group a little bit more this year. Facebook has really kind of been trash over the past couple of years. The Facebook group was intimate and amazing when it first started in 2017, and the algorithm has changed things. The algorithm doesn't show posts to people, so like people who are asking for help aren't getting it because nobody sees it. I don't even get announcements when people post in that group unless they post something with a keyword that raises a flag. Like, do I have to delete this, right? And so being more intentional about checking that and like engaging in real conversations. And I want to be real clear. If the Facebook group doesn't improve and become a true valuable resource and addition to the community in 2025, I will just shut it down. I'll sunset the whole Facebook group because if it's not going to create community and add value, like what noise? We do not need to create more noise in the world, and I'm not about that. I'll be writing more pen pal letters, which I'm excited about. I know a lot of people love those. Some people don't. They opt out, which is fine. If you don't want a pen pal letter, I never do sales or like marketing or anything. Just like chatting, trying to build intimacy. I'm going to do more of that. I already mentioned that we're going to do the in-person. We're going to have more community members as guests on the podcast. We've done a number of those in the past, but we're going to be a bit more intentional about that. So if you're like, I would love to be a guest on the podcast. I feel like I have some real good things to offer the community, even if it's just a story of like resilience or failure. Like any of those things allow people to feel seen, understood. Like there's people out there who get it. So reach out if you are interested in being a guest. And also, we're going to continue to have guests on the podcast that are actively seeking to solve problems for this industry. One of the Mobile Bev Pros values is that we invest in those who invest in us as an industry. And so we had the podcast with Justin Goodhart, who has created a piece of software specific to this industry. Love that. I'm going to try and get another vendor that I'm in talks with at the moment who is solving a very massive challenge that we have in this industry, though they didn't solve it for this industry. So I'm not sure if their particular solution is going to be applicable to the industry as a whole, but there's a subset of people I think that their solution is going to be good for. So we're out there actively seeking people who are invested in solving problems and making this industry easier to thrive in. And so, yeah, we got a lot of great things on the horizon for the industry. We're going to partner with some other kind of OG thought leaders in the space to create new levels of engagement that we have in the past, not been offering. And so we'll have some announcements around that. And mainly, I just want people to feel like they have a place to get the support that they need to really thrive and succeed in their entrepreneurial ventures, whether that be a mobile bar or mobile ice cream or mobile pizza, event-based, right? And obviously, we could do the work that we do for any entrepreneur that is kind of in a similar space. But I think that event-based is a big enough niche that we can really live and thrive there. And so I'm excited for 2025.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. With all that being said, I do want to highlight what you said about reach out. We say that. I think it's even in like the outro for Mobile Bev Pros, like the podcast, like we say reach out, but we always get like, oh my God, you're a real person. And like this year, we really want to be real persons. This year, like we love creating relationships with you guys. And so if something in these podcasts lands for you, if it hits home, even if like it's not in the podcast, but just something that you've watched in the academy or that you've seen in a reel or something like that, like Lance, reach out and connect with us because we do want to create those connections. Community is such a pivotal part of what we do, and that's a two-way street. So we want you guys to be active. So hello@mobilebevpros.com if you want to reach us. You can DM Sarah, you can DM me, you can DM us through the Mobile Bev Pros Instagram or other socials, but we do want you to reach out. So I just wanted to highlight that. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. This one has been golden and there will be more to come, and we will talk to you all in the next one.
And that wraps up today's episode. I hope it was valuable. I would love to hear from you what you thought. You can drop me a line at hello@mobilebevpros.com or find me on Instagram @mobilebevpros. If you're looking for more valuable mobile bar related content, we have a website full of it. You can find us at www.mobilebevpros.com. And I'd love to see you in our Facebook community, also by the name of, you guessed it, Mobile Bev Pros. Thank you for joining me today, and until next time, cheers.